everyone, and welcome once again to Geekfest Rants. Today we have a special episode about Godzilla. One of our contributors, Mike Sutton, recently came back from a trip to Japan where he was lucky enough to be able to go on some special tours where they actually took him to Toho Studios. Hi, Mike. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. Before we talk about your trip, let's give our listeners a little background, because Toho Studios might not be familiar to everybody. This is the place where apparently they shot all of the Godzilla films in Japan. Tell us a little bit about the background of the Godzilla films. When did they come about? What was the political reasons behind the theme of Godzilla and its background and its history?
Well, Godzilla came out in 1954. The original title was Godzilla. Mr. Tomoyuki Tanaka was the producer, and he had seen The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, and he had loved the movie, and he always wanted to do a monster flick. And his original idea was to have a giant octopus come up and destroy Tokyo.
Wow.
And that's what he would like to do. And he wanted to do some kind of monster flick.
But Ray Harryhausen did that already.
Ray Harryhausen did that one, yes. It came from beneath the sea.
Beneath the sea, that's right.
But really, he liked just the idea of a giant octopus. And what happened was, he came up, had his script. Originally, it actually was just called G. There was no name to it.
Oh, wow.
And he went to... Eiji Tsuburaya was the special effects guy. He was doing a lot of films in World War II, and it was bombings of battle scenes, and they turned out to be propaganda films. But they were very convincing.
A lot of miniature photography, that sort of thing? Miniature
photography, and they had looked at a lot of convincing footage, and some people thought that they were real bombings and destructions of battleships and cities, but it was not. It was all propaganda stuff. So he had brought him in, and the director, Mr. Honda, brought them all in for the movie. I don't remember who the movie was made by, who the screenwriter was. And so that was Mr. Tsuburaya. He was the founding father of special effects in Japan.
In Japan, okay.
And he had loved King Kong. He had screened King Kong back when it was out in 1933, and years later it was reissued in Japan, and he liked it. He always wanted to try the stop motion, but unfortunately there was not enough money and time to do it. So he had to come up with another way that he can create the creature. So he thought of the idea about making a man in the rubber suit.
Now, at this time, Japan doesn't have a long line of horror creature catalog, like in the States where
Correct.
You've had your Mummy and your Dracula and your Frankenstein. They kind of wanted their own creature.
Yeah, they just wanted another movie similar to The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, and they didn't have a special effects department. Nobody really made a lot of special effects. It wasn't like us with Ray Harryhausen
But they were looking
Willis
beyond
O'Brien.
one film, right? They were originally looking to do a series?
No, they were just looking to do one film.
Wow,
they wanted
just
to do
one.
Their one. From what I understand, they only want to do one. They want to do a giant monster movie, similar to The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. And they came up with the idea of Godzilla to come and attack, Tokyo. So a lot of stuff was all pioneering. It was very all new.
Mm-hmm.
It was not something that was planned. And again, like I said, Mr. Tsuburaya wanted to do special effects, stop motion, but again, they didn't have the money. The other problem with the Japanese film industry, from what I've read and heard from other people that are really serious into the Godzilla mythos and the history, that Toho studios and movie studios in the back then, in the 50s, they didn't have a lot of money. It's not like our film studios where you could spend $100,000 on a movie. They may have had only $20,000 to make it. And they only had 3 weeks. So they didn't have they can sit luxuries of 6 months, a year to do things. So they had to do things quicker, cheap. And really that's why they came up with the idea about a man in a rubber suit, because they couldn't do the stop motion, even though we heard Tsuburaya wanted to, but he just couldn't afford it. But the idea also was, okay, we're going to do it, but how do you do it? They had no idea, so they created a lot of techniques and things all from scratch. Nobody else did it. Willis O'Brien was doing miniatures and stop motion. So they made the movie, and it turned out to be a big hit. I don't remember the exact number, but it was like a third of the population of Japan at that time saw Godzilla in the movie theaters. And it just resonated through everybody's being, and it just took off and spawned 25 sequels.
Wow, so now this is mid to late 50s we're talking about?
1954.
Okay. And now this continues through the rest of the 50s, the 60s, part of the 70s.
Into the 70s, yep.
And then it picks up again.
Back in 85.
In 85, they did a couple more.
Yep. Yeah.
And
Godzilla 85, which was entitled here in the U.S., And then it picked up into the 90s and spawned another 5-6 movies, and right now it's on hiatus.
Now, one was done outside Japan, the Ronald Emmerich one, right?
Yes.
And that had nothing to do with Toho Studios or anything?
No. Thank God. That movie is a piece of crap.
Mike is not a very big fan of that one. But that is the last time, at least I think, an American audience has seen an American-produced one, except when they released some of the newer Japanese ones in the, like, around 2000 or something like that.
They had Godzilla 2000, was released in the theater, and then everything else went straight to DVD.
And the rumor now is that they might be working on something.
Yeah, Magnolia Pictures has the rights to it. It was supposed to be coming out next year. We haven't heard anything, so the assumption will be out in 2013. But we have to sit and wait. And allegedly, it's Godzilla fans, people who really like the character and the property, they're going to do it justice.
We'll see.
We'll see.
Now, tell me about the actual trip to the studios that you took. This was part of a bigger trip you were taking to Japan in general, but one of the stops was the studio because the group that you were with, it's part of the G-Fest group, correct?
Yeah. There's a magazine called G-Fan out there, and it's dedicated to Godzilla, Gamera, Ultraman, and Japanese tokusatsu films. It comes out 4 times a year. You can go to their website, just search for G-Fan, and every year there's a convention. It's held in Chicago. It draws about 1,200, 1,300 people every year. I've gone there about 13, 14 years, the past 13, 14 years. And they organize a trip called G-Tour, where we're going to Japan and doing sightseeing, and it's geared towards the Godzilla movies.
Now, this trip is not every year. This is like 5 or 6 years, maybe.
This is the second one. The first one happened in 2004 for the 50th anniversary of Godzilla. They wanted to go down because they knew there would be presentations and memorabilia, costumes, and things like that because it was the anniversary. I didn't go, unfortunately. That's one of my regrets that I never saved up and went. But I didn't want to miss this one. A year ago, Mr. Akira Takarada from the first Godzilla movie, he came down to G-Fest to Chicago, and he was just blown away of all the fans. He didn't realize there was just so many nice people and all the Godzilla fans that went to Chicago.
So many years later.
And so many years later, and remember his films, because he was in several of the films. He was an actor for Toho. And he just loved the convention. And I have a picture of him, and he actually wanted our picture, which I always thought that was the greatest thing. I always remember when he was at G-Fest. We were taking pictures with him, and then he finally said, somebody take pictures of me with you guys. And he posed with everybody. He was talking to JD, the publisher of the magazine, and JD told him, we're going to come to Japan. We're doing a tour. And he said, you guys ever go to Toho Studios? And he said, well, back in 2004, they went, but no, they weren't able to get in. And he said, well, I'll see what I can do.
So this is the first group then?
Yes, and this is to understand what the story goes. Somebody had told me that was at G-Fest. So we didn't hold up any hopes or anything, and next thing you know is when they announced the tour, one of the first stops was to go meet Mr. Akira Takarada at Toho Studios. That was the first day. We went in and we met Mr. Takarada, Mr. Bano, who was the director for Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster, Kawakita, the other director for a lot of the Millennium, the 90s Godzilla movies, was there. The original suit actor for Ultraman, his name escapes me now, he ended up coming down to visit us. And also, the original Godzilla suit actor was Mr. Nakajima. And there was a little panel, and they gave us a tour. We went into one of the lots where they filmed some of the movies. We're assuming.
Now, what happens in this studio now? Is it used for anything? Or
yeah, it's Toho Studios where they still make movies. They
but
make
not necessarily Godzilla films, other films.
Oh yeah, they make all types of movies. It's a regular movie studio, the same as Warner Brothers or any of the big ones that we have here. It's an active studio.
But you got to see the empty stages of where they shot all, like for the last.
We got to go into stage 8. We don't know what was filmed in there. But it's one of the stages, and it was a big empty room, but it still had a backdrop painting of a sky. And our assumption is, maybe 1 or 2 Godzilla movies were filmed in there, or anything that Toho did. They do a lot of movies, and dramas, sci-fi, comedies.
I guess these days they don't save all these backdrops and sets there in the studio. They might be mothballed somewhere, if even.
I would assume they save them somewhere. One of the neat things is while we were there, and there was a little panel about talking with Mr. Takarada and the other guests. After he was done, there was a sheet covering something on a table up front, and we didn't know what it was, and I was sitting in the front, and he goes, let me show you something, and he pulls a sheet away, and it was the original oxygen destroyer that was used in the first Godzilla movie.
The first film. Oof.
It was one of the original props. And next to it was the diving helmet that he wore in the first movie, and he said they found it in the warehouse. So other things are probably sitting in the Toho warehouses But who knows what's there and where it is. But I'm sure they're storing some of the props. But I honestly don't know. I can't answer
You're talking
where
about
the
like
suits are.
60-year-old props here.
Well,
or more.
the suits are not going to be around. That stuff's made out of foam. That deteriorates very fast.
Mm-hmm.
Also, a lot of the filmings were done in water in the giant pool that was in Toho Studios. So that stuff just deteriorated and falls apart. And that they would have gotten rid of. But you're not going to find the costumes anywhere.
Now, this is very
That'll
unusual.
disappear.
I mean, I don't know if maybe for Japan is normal, but for us, it's kind of like saying, oh, by the way, guys, come over to Paramount Studios. And when you show up there, you have like a famous director show up, a famous actor, all these different people show up. And it seemed kind of odd that these people would just show up, and so many of them.
These were all invited by our guest. He went out to the people that he knew and asked them, come on down. The people from G-Fest are going to be here.
And the group
And
you're
he put
with
it
is
together.
about, what, like 30, 40 people?
We were about 36.
So you got 36 of you tour members meeting something like 5 or 6, not contemporary stars, but these are like
Golden Age.
The Golden Age monster movie for Japan creators, stars, and like behind the scenes people.
It was Hiro Nakajima, which was in the original Godzilla costume. He was there. He played it all the way up into the 70s. Yeah, but these were all part of the Golden Age. I mean, Mr. Nakajima is part of the Golden Age, and Mr. Kira Takarada, the first Godzilla movie, and many other movies. Yeah, this wasn't normal. And the nice thing is most of these people have all been to G-Fest, and we've met them a lot, so it was great to see them again, and they knew of us.
Instead of them coming to you, you're coming to them this time.
Yeah, we came to them, so we just think some of them knew what it was like. Mr. Nakajima's been in the United States several times.
Wow.
He's come to G-Fest twice. He's been into, I think it was Monsterpalooza, some convention out in the West Coast, once or twice. So he's been making the rounds.
Now, I remember you also mentioned that not only did you see some of these guys at the studio, but later you guys had like a dinner?
Yes, we went out to a shabu shabu dinner, and Mr. Nakajima came down with us. Again, the gentleman that played the original Ultraman. And then Mr. Akira Takarada came down for dinner. The whole group of us, we were in the restaurant, and they would come down. There was an interpreter, and they would sit with us at the table for a few minutes. We sat and talked to them. So, for us, my God, this was great. I mean, the first day, we get a tour of Toho Studios. We get to see the original Oxygen Destroyer. We get to see the statue of Godzilla outside of Toho Studios. We get to see a filming, just 30 minutes of the Godzilla vs. Final Wars in a professional theater. The sound and the screen, it's a viewing room in Toho Studios. And then at nighttime, they come out to dinner with us, and you sit down and talk to them. Mr. Takarada sat at one of the tables. He was drinking sake with the guys. He was buying rounds of sake, and people were drinking. My God, we were just like, oh my God, that was the best day of that entire trip. And we all went, it just goes all downhill from here. And it was the first day.
Once again, it's like almost to kind of translate to us here, that's like going down to 20th Century Fox, not only getting the tour, meeting all these famous people, but then saying, hey guys, let's all go out to dinner and hang out for a while.
Yeah.
And they do it.
Right. That's like meeting out with Mr. George Lucas.
Yeah.
He gives you a tour of Skywalker Ranch.
Right.
You sit down and watch 20 minutes, half hour of Star Wars in his theater. And then it's like, we're going out for dinner. You want to come with us?
We're going to meet Harrison Ford, and we're going to watch some Dennis Muren,
right.
effects demos.
And you're going to come down, and we're all going to eat dinner tonight.
And you guys have
and
any
you're
questions?
Going to go, questions, let's sit and talk. Okay. And that's what it was. It was an unbelievable experience. And just the Holy Oxygen Destroyer, as a big Godzilla fan, it's the Oxygen Destroyer. It's a prop from the original movie. You got Mr. Nakajima, is Godzilla. It was a day. It was just a great day.
And again, this isn't a prop from a year ago. This is a 60-plus, possibly year-old prop.
1954.
And it's cool because I saw you guys took pictures with everybody. They all got to hold certain props and take pictures with them.
And well, that's the other thing, too, is when Mr. Takarada went, who wants to hold it? We went, hold it? Hold the Oxygen Destroyer? Okay, me. I'll do it. We were all silent, I think, for a split second, because like, hold it? Did he just say hold it? Yeah, it was just an unbelievable day. It's just something that's not going to happen all the time. We don't know when that would ever happen again.
Now, from the pictures you showed me, I noticed that you did go to a lot of other places. And in general, how relevant and how important is Godzilla these days in terms of Does the current culture still seek out the toys, the movies? Is it represented enough, or is it not as important as it used to be?
I think it's represented. It's there, but it's not as big as it once was. The town next to Toho Studios is like Ultraman Town. It was Ultra Street. Ultraman was hanging from the wires. The lampposts are in the shape of Ultraman. The maps have Ultraman on it. There's a statue. And then when you just go out to the other areas, yeah, Godzilla's there. We went to the Habaya statue, the park in Habaya, to see the Godzilla statue. But mostly, it's really Ultraman, Kamen Rider, and a lot of the superheroes on TV are more popular right now. There is a following, but I think because there's no movies out there, it's waned off a little bit. There are toys. We went to a toy store, Mandarake. It's all over Japan. It's a chain store. You get in there, all types of collectibles. It's toys, model kits, books, CDs, magazines.
But is this a specialty store or kind of like a Toys R Us where you have your current hot toys?
It's a specialty store. You
like
go
a collector
there,
store.
It's a collector store. You sell your toys and they resell them. So all the stuff that you're buying, it's from collectors. And even just on anime, there's just rows and rows of books on anime toys, model kits, Gundam, Ultraman, you name it, it's all there. So yeah, the toys are there. And Bandai is releasing some toys, and I'm not a big toy expert, so I'm going to start off by saying that. But I know there's a Toho Giant series, and the toys are gorgeous. They're all extremely limited, and they're very expensive. There was a Biollante that's coming out now. It'll cost you $500. You got to get it from Japan. You got to order them through the websites. But it's so finely detailed and painted. It's a gorgeous toy, but they're very pricey. Revoltech came out with a lot of toys. Those are pretty good. You have a lot of articulation in the joints and the heads and the arms. I didn't really get into those, but now I understand they're going to release a whole line of Godzilla Revoltech type toys, so I might go into those because it's the big G. But toys are just a little bit lower now. You don't have a lot because there's no movies. It's like anything like here. Star Wars Clone Wars comes out. The movie, what do? You release all these toys. So it's the same thing. If there was a Godzilla movie, there would be abundance of toys.
It would get more popular there,
the same
too.
as Gamera. Yeah, when Gamera came out, Gamera Little Brave, who's known as Toho, there was a lot of toys. And then now that's waned out a little bit. But you still get things. They're always producing garage kits and some toys. I mean, the stuff doesn't disappear. Just there's not a lot of it. But again, I'm not big into the toys collecting. I do dabble in it. But looking at those Toho Mega Series, it's just $500 though, $300 for one.
That's a little
They're very
steep.
pricey. But they're so detailed and painted poses. They're gorgeous toys. They really are.
One of the things that surprised me, because when I heard you were going on this trip, I thought that not only were you taking these tours, but you were actually going to a convention. And I was very surprised to find out that, no, the convention is still the Chicago one that happens every year here.
Correct.
They don't have a yearly one there, which completely shocked me because you figure that's the place where this came from. They got to have some yearly event in Tokyo that a big deal event, but it almost sounds almost like, unless there's other countries involved that I don't know about, America seems to be the place that they're still holding, the torch for this film.
The torch is there, but it's just not big. There's no organized conventions that we know of.
Now, the films here, when they came here, they came pretty quickly in terms of they released them in Japan and then they came here. They didn't wait like 10 years later to come here. They kind of streamed in as they were being produced.
A year, 2 years later.
And the popularity here, granted, we're not talking blockbusters, but we're talking about, it was a legitimate genre that came from Japan that stayed for a very long time.
Well, yeah, thanks to Famous Monsters, Forey Ackerman, he always had the Godzilla movies out there. And it was always the part of the Grindhouse. There were those Grindhouse movie theaters, the old drive-in theaters.
Plus, the Channel 5 movie in the summer, every Sunday, every Saturday, you had 2 or 3 playing back-to-back.
Chiller Theater.
Yeah.
You would always pull up those. But they really started in the Grindhouses. When they came out, they were thrown in late night or the drive-ins, and they were paired with some other old movies.
Right. They weren't really considered to be high art. This is kid monster fun.
Right. They were monster
Sci-fi.
fun. Sci-fi. That's it. Like a lot. But a lot of movies like that, too, back in the 70s, that's the way they were. It wasn't, we have a brand new movie, so we're going to be like Star Wars and all this advertising and push it. That's not the way things worked back then. There was always, and I remember when Godzilla vs. Megalon came out, it was paired with a movie called Bug, and about those cockroaches that would shoot fire out of their rear ends, and they would eat flesh and chuckle and burnt things, but they were geared together. Well, I always remember I wanted to see the Godzilla movie, but I had to see the Bug movie. And as a young kid of 8, 9 years old, I was scared. I couldn't watch the Bug movie. I wanted to see the Godzilla flick.
Now, as we talked a little bit earlier, when America tried to make their version of it, I understand you're not very happy with it. Now, what about it?
It's not a Godzilla movie.
That's my question. What about it did not live up to the expectations of what a Godzilla movie should be like? Because it was, like I said, it was a studio production, a pretty well-known director at the time, Matthew Broderick, a pretty well-known movie star. They had a good budget. The effects were, they weren't scaling back on the effects, but what is it that failed that movie as far as you remember? That was called
Godzilla. Well, the problem I had with the first third of it was kind of a little homage to the original, a little bit of mystery, sinking to the boat.
Don't see the monster.
You don't really see it.
Hints and little bits and
hints,
pieces.
which was great. And then the next part of it was the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms.
It physically looked like.
He comes out at South Street Seaport. He terrorizes downtown Manhattan. Then he goes into Midtown. And you're sitting there going, this is the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. But then he goes underground.
Because they does a lot of four-legged stuff, I believe, right?
Yeah. It was more of an iguana. It wasn't a two-legged. They took away the human type walking on 2 legs and hands.
Which at first you could say, you know what, it looked kind of human because it was a guy in a suit. But after a while, that became the staple. That was the signature of the creature. It was the way it walked, the way it moved. You're not going to all of a sudden make it running around on 4 legs.
But just to go back to the Roland Emmerich, Dean Devlin, he hid underground. How it hides in the subway, which was ridiculous. It didn't breathe fire. Godzilla was supposed to be out destroying buildings, fighting the military. Didn't do any of that stuff. Didn't breathe fire. Didn't look like Godzilla in any respect. And then the last part of the movie was Jurassic Park. It had all these eggs and these mini dinosaurs that goes running around.
It was probably trying to cash in on the Jurassic Park saga.
And that's just the problem I have with the movie is just the monster itself. And then the actors and the characters. References the worm guy, and why do we have to have a French Secret Service guy? Made no sense. And then you get the mayors like Roger Ebert, the film critic, because his cohort was Siskel. It wasn't taken serious. Like the first few minutes it did, and then the rest became a comedy. And my God, when he was looking for pregnancy tests so they can find urine to find out if the monster's a female, oh, it's pregnant, and it's eating fish, and it's just
it looks like they tried to combine a lot of different movies and call it Godzilla.
Exactly. It was not a Godzilla movie. It lost the whole point. Godzilla is a part of nature. It's a force that you can't stop. It's a force of nature. They turned him into some stupid lizard eating fish and having babies. It just took it all away. It's just not the point of the movie.
Well, the other thing is that, unfortunately, this is the type of movie that has not been, or at least the genre itself, has not been duplicated too much. You don't see a lot of people who either pay homage to Godzilla or try to even imitate it. The closest thing I've ever could think of recently is the movie Cloverfield. Thank God they didn't call it Godzilla, but at least you're actually seeing somebody attempting to do a big monster in the city movie. And I remember while they were promoting, before the promotion started for the movie, and the little snippet they gave you at the trailer, there was a buzz going around. It's like, is this a Godzilla film? And they purposely didn't tell you because they wanted people to be confused. They wanted people to say, wait a minute, is this what that is? Obviously it wasn't. But I think it was a good attempt at doing that genre. Again, not redoing Godzilla, but attempting the genre of Godzilla.
Right. It was just a giant monster movie. It worked. Listen, I'm not a big fan of the whole camera, first person.
The particular style. I know what you're talking about. The Blair Witch thing.
The Blair Witch style. Wasn't a big fan, but it worked as a giant monster movie. And like I said, they just wanted to keep it a secret. Abrams wanted to keep it a secret. He didn't want to show you what the monster looked like.
And the more
until the movie hit.
And the more you were confused, the more you wonder about it, the more interested you get, more curious, and hopefully more ticket sales.
Right.
But I think there was a lot of things in that movie. They are, in a way, quietly trying to pay homage to the style and the concept of the big monster. And obviously, there's only one big monster. It's Godzilla. King Kong is not that big. If you look at the King Kong films, it's got to be Godzilla.
Well, yeah, for me it would be Godzilla, but I mean King Kong does have its following. And we have to thank the matchup of King Kong versus Godzilla, which is another great movie that back in '62 you put together. And even before that, Toho went and matched Godzilla up with one of their other famous creations of Mothra. And they came up with the idea, so we should put Mothra and Godzilla together. Because Mothra, this year is their anniversary. I'm trying to remember how many years, like 40 years Mothra came out, that let's put two of their big iconic monsters together.
Well, this goes back
did
again.
Really well in '62. And they said, you know what? Which should be the next one? Who's the next big monster?
There you go.
King Kong.
Well, this goes back to classic American horror where you have the Frankenstein versus the Mummy or the Wolfman
Frankenstein versus the Wolfman.
And, you do these matchups, which, they're not, again, incredibly excellent, but it's a cool little mix of what would happen if you mix these two characters together. How would it turn out? Now, the only other, not so much film, but let's say TV show that I think also tried to pay homage to Godzilla is Clone Wars, when they did an episode the season before called the Zelo Beast, which is obviously the name Zelo Beast. Zelo is Godzilla, in a different way. And again, you're dealing with this huge, somewhat reptilianish monster loose in a major city.
And indestructible.
Oh yeah, and destroying things and after something specific, and they, the army comes after it and all kinds, and they finally defeat him in a certain manner. And again, you're talking about people who remember the original and they want to retell their story for their show to pay homage to it, I believe.
Yeah, it was more of a Godzilla movie than the Godzilla movie with Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich. And I always remember, true story, I took the day off to watch that movie, opening day.
Oh, boy.
Sat there going, what the hell am I watching? I can't believe it. And I got sick the next day. Ended up with a sore throat, fever. I ended up with a head cold. And I was out for 2 days, but I blamed it on watching the movie because it was awful. I couldn't believe I actually waited to watch that movie.
Wow.
I'm a purist.
Are you optimistic for the future?
Yeah, we'll see. From what I understand is they're fans. They've called, they want to do a movie and pay it due justice and make it a Godzilla movie. We'll see. I would love to say yes, but at this point I'm just going to wait and see what happens.
Well, I would say, it'd be great if they give us something. That would be the best thing. And if they don't give us something, I don't mind seeing other films or other TV shows that continue to pay homage to it. If they can't give me the real thing, at least don't do a knockoff, but do things that at least for a fact that they love these films so much that they're willing to create their own tribute type of material for people to watch.
Exactly. And what I'm hoping we're going to get is what happened with the Godzilla movie from Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich, was after we produced the Godzilla movie, Japan said, okay, we need to put our own movie out. So I'm hoping a year or two later afterwards we can get a new Godzilla movie. And we got to hope and wait and see. There's still fans out there. Japan is associated with Godzilla. When you say giant monsters or monsters to Japan, it's Godzilla. For us, it's King Kong.
Well, you know what?
Great Britain had Gorgo.
That's the thing. If you can have these franchises that last years and years, the Bond films, Doctor Who, these things continue and continue and continue, it wouldn't be so bad to have these waves of Godzilla come and go every now and then.
Yeah. We got more movies than Star Wars. We got more movies than Star Trek.
26? That's insane. That's
right.
Pretty crazy.
That's a long-running franchise.
Wow.
That's better than Star Trek and Star Wars.
Well, let me ask you one final question, Mike. Next time they have another trip to Japan and you might be able to see some more Godzilla-related locations or studios or stuff like that, would you do it again?
Yes. Oh, yeah. After the tour, and again, the first day we had the Godzilla tour, Toho Studios. We also went to the Ultraman Festival, which was great. But then we did all the cultural things. We saw a lot of gardens.
Historical things,
and we had a lot of fun. So it's not just about going to Japan. It's not just about Godzilla. It's going for the other cultures. It's going for all the other things you can see. But yeah, if you can throw in another location where that Godzilla destroyed, go for it. That's what we saw. We saw Osaka Castle.
Famous destruction sites from Godzilla tour.
Kobe Tower. Where Gamera destroyed in Baragon. Anything. But it's a lot of fun, but I'll definitely go back.
Well, luckily, since this only happens every 5 or 6 years, you have plenty of time to start saving money for it.
You need to start saving up, yes. And buy an extra suitcase. For anybody who goes and you're a toy collector, bring yourself an extra suitcase because you're going to fill it up with all the stuff you're going to buy over there.
Oh, boy. Cool. Well, thank you, Mike, for joining us. And I'm glad you were able to take the time to share your memories from your recent trip to Japan. And on behalf of Mike and myself, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. And we'll see you here next time on Geekfest Rants. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Stop.